The Valori were dying slowly in the cold darkness of space. Ambassador Talon stood before the old transmission machine, her silver-scaled hands shaking as she prepared to send the most important message of her life. Behind her, through the cracked window of their refugee ship called the Last Dawn, she could see the tired faces of her people. 300,000 Valori filled every corridor, every room, every small space of ships that were never built to carry so many. 8 months ago, their beautiful homeworld had been green and alive. Valora Prime had crystal blue seas and forests that seemed to sing when the wind blew through them. Then the Krath Empire came without any warning. Their warships filled the sky like angry insects. They burned everything. The fires lasted for 11 days before the survivors managed to escape in whatever ships they could. Find now, they drifted at the edge of a star system that belonged to a species they had only heard stories about, humans. The other races of the galaxy said they were young and aggressive. Some said they were dangerous and could not be trusted. Others said they were strange creatures who did things that made no sense. Elder Bosson stood beside Talon. He was very old, and his once beautiful head crest had become weak and drooped with sadness. He shook his head slowly and said that the humans would surely turn them away, or maybe they would see how weak the Valori were and attack them to take what little they had left. Talon knew he might be right, but she also knew they had no other choice. Their food would run out in 3 weeks. Their medical supplies were almost gone. Children were getting sick. Old ones were dying. If they did not find help soon, they would all die floating in the empty space. Between stars, she pressed the button and sent their message into the darkness. It was a simple message because she did not have the strength for fancy words. They were refugees. They asked only for shelter. They had nothing to give except their thanks. The wait was terrible. Every minute felt like an hour. Talon stayed at the transmission machine, afraid to move, afraid to hope. For hours passed, then the machine made a sound. A human face appeared on their old screen. It was a female with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that seemed very serious. She wore a blue uniform with symbols that Talon did not understand. The human spoke in a calm voice and said her name was Admiral Park Yuna of the United Earth Defense Force. Talon tried to explain their situation. She said they had more than 300,000 people. She said they had wounded and sick. She said they had children who had seen terrible things. She tried to say how long they had been running, but the Admiral stopped her. Admiral Park said she understood. She said they had received the location of the Valori fleet. Then she said something strange. She told Talon to hold position and not to be alarmed by what would happen next. The screen went dark. Elder Bosson made an angry sound and asked what the Admiral meant. Before Talon could answer, space itself seemed to tear open in front of their fleet. A ship came through the hole in reality. But this was not like any ship Talon had ever seen. It was enormous, bigger than anything the Valori had ever built. Weapons covered its surface like thorns on a dangerous plant. The hull was marked with scars and burn marks from many battles. This ship had fought many times and survived. Talon read the name painted on the front in white letters. UED's Indomitable. Elder Bosun whispered a prayer to their ancestors. But then something unexpected happened. Smaller ships began to pour out from the giant warship. Talon expected attack craft, but these were different. They were transport ships, medical vessels with a Red Cross symbol on their sides. Engineering pods carrying equipment and supplies. The communication machine made another sound. A different human appeared on the screen. This one was male and younger than the Admiral. He had a kind face and a warm smile. He introduced himself as Commander Kang Doyan of the Indomitable. Commander, Kang said they were sending medical teams right away. Engineers and emergency supplies were coming too. Admiral Park herself was coming to meet with Talon personally to understand what they needed most. Then he said something that made Talon's heart skip. He said they were safe now. He promised. Talon stared at the screen for a long moment. She could not understand what was happening. Her people had asked for shelter. They expected maybe a planet where they could hide. Maybe a small corner of space where no one would bother them. They never expected this. She asked the commander why. Why send a warship? Why send soldiers and doctors and engineers? Why come themselves instead of just pointing to some empty world and telling the Valori to go there? Commander Kong's smile changed. It became something harder, something that made Talon's scales feel tight on her body. He said that shelter was not just a place. It was a promise, and humans did not make promises they could not keep. Behind him, through the window of his ship's bridge, Talon could see the Indomitable's weapons coming online. Giant guns turned and aimed not at the refugee fleet, but outward, toward the stars where the craft might come from. The first human shuttle landed in their main hangar bay. 20 minutes later, a team of doctors came out carrying bags of equipment. They moved quickly and with purpose. Asking through their translation devices where the sick and wounded were, Talon watched them work. These strange creatures had come from far away. They did not know the Valori. They owed the Valori nothing. Yet here they were, treating Valori wounds, giving Valori children food and clean water, setting up machines that made medicine. Elder Bosun appeared beside her again. His voice was quiet and confused as he said that this made no sense. No species helped strangers like this. There had to be a trick. There had to be something the humans wanted. Talon watched a human nurse carefully wrap bandages around a young Valori child's burned arm. The child was crying, and the nurse made soft sounds to calm her, even though they could not understand each other's words. Maybe, Talon said quietly, not everything in the galaxy worked the way they thought it did. Maybe some species really did help others simply because they could. She hoped she was right. The humans worked faster than Talon thought possible. In just 6 hours after the Indomitable arrived, every single Valori ship had been visited by medical teams. The human doctors carried scanning machines that could learn how Valori bodies worked in just a few minutes. They brought medicines that their ships could make fresh on the spot. Most surprising of all, they brought gentle hands and kind eyes for people they had never met before. Talon walked through the crowded corridors of the Last Dawn, watching the humans do their work. She stopped when she saw something that made her heart ache in a strange way. A young human medic named Corporal Shin Murray was sitting on the floor next to a small Valori child. This child had not spoken a single word since watching her parents die on Valora Prime many months ago. She just sat and stared at nothing, lost somewhere inside her own mind where the memories could not hurt her. Murray could not speak the child's language. The translation machines were still trying to learn Valori words. So instead of talking, she simply sat there. She drew little pictures on a flat screen. She made silly faces. She did not try to force the child to respond. She just stayed close, patient, and warm, asking for nothing in return. Slowly, very slowly, the child's stiff body began to relax. Commander Kong had come aboard the Last Dawn to meet with Talon personally. She found him watching Corporal Murray and the child from across the corridor. His face was thoughtful and a little sad. Talon asked him something that had been bothering her since the humans first arrived. She asked why his people acted as if Valori's suffering was their own. The Valor were strangers. They came from far away. They had nothing to give the humans in return for all this help. Kang was quiet for a moment. Then he said that it was their own suffering. When Talon asked him to explain, he told her about human history. Humans, he said, had a long past. Much of that past was filled with cruelty. Humans had been refugees themselves many times. They had been driven from their homes by war and hunger and hatred. They knew what it felt like to flee with nothing. They knew what it felt like to beg for help and be refused. A long time ago, Kong said, humans had made a choice. They decided they would never become the ones who turned away. They would never watch others suffer and do nothing when they had the power to help. Before Talon could respond to this, alarms began to scream throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Kong's communication device exploded with urgent voices. The news was bad. Very bad. Valori sensors had detected ships approaching fast. 12 Krath hunter-killer vessels were heading straight for them. They would be close enough to fire weapons in just 4 hours. Talon felt her blood turn to ice. The Krath had found them again. They always found them, no matter how far the Valori ran. She turned to Commander Kang and told him he should leave. He should take his people and go before the Krath arrived. The Valori could not ask the humans to die for them. Kong's face did not change. His voice was as hard as metal when he told her to go to the observation deck. When she asked why, he simply said she should trust him. Talon went to the observation deck. Through the large windows, she watched the Indomitable move. The massive warship positioned itself between the refugee fleet and the direction the Krath were coming from. The normal white lights on its hull changed to a deep, pulsing red color. Weapon ports opened all along its body. Dozens of guns appeared, then hundreds. Then, so many that Talon could not count them. The ship looked like some ancient beast waking up and showing its teeth. Admiral. Ark's voice echoed across every communication channel. She announced herself and the name of her ship. She said the Valori people were now under human protection. Any attack on them would be treated as an act of war against Earth and all her allies. She advised the Krath to think again about what they were doing. The Krath did not think again. They came screaming out of faster than light space with all their weapons firing. Their formation was perfect. 12 ships that had destroyed countless Valori vessels before. 12 ships that Talon had believed were unbeatable. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Indomitable moved in ways that should have been impossible for something so large. Its defensive guns created a net of fire that destroyed every missile the Krath sent. Its main weapons roared and tore through Krath shields as if they were made of paper. When 2 Krath ships tried to go around the warship to reach the refugees, the Indomitable simply accelerated faster than anything Talon had ever seen and blocked them again. When it was over, 12 Krath vessels were nothing but clouds of broken metal floating in space. The Indomitable had been hit. Talon could see damage to its hull, fires burning in some sections. But it still held its position between the refugees and the empty space where enemies might come from. Commander Kong's voice came through Talon's communication device. He sounded as calm as if he was talking about the weather. He said that Admiral Park sent her greetings. The Admiral wanted to know if Talon would like to join her for dinner on the Indomitable to discuss what would happen next. Talon realized tears were running down her face. She had not cried since leaving Valora Prime. She had told herself she needed to be strong for her people. But now, watching the battered human warship still standing guard over them, she could not stop the tears. For the first time in 8 months, she felt something she had forgotten was possible. She felt hope. The Valori had expected to be forgotten. They thought the humans would put them on some empty moon and give them just enough food to survive. They thought they would be left alone to slowly fade away while the humans moved on to more important things. That was how the galaxy worked. That was what powerful species did with refugees. The humans did something completely different. They took the Valori to a world called New Eden. It was a beautiful planet that humans had made livable. Through their technology, green forests covered much of the land. Clean rivers flowed through valleys. The sky was blue, almost like Valora Prime had been before the fires. The humans did not offer the Valori a small piece of land to rent. They gave them an entire continent, not a loan, not a temporary arrangement. A gift, with papers that said the Velar owned it completely and could govern it themselves. Elder Bosun could not believe it. As their transport ship flew down through the clouds, he kept saying it was impossible. No species gave away territory for nothing. There had to be conditions hidden somewhere. There had to be a price they would have to pay later. Their human guide was a young engineer named Lieutenant Oga. She had been assigned to help the Valori build their new home, and she seemed excited about the work. When Bosun asked about the hidden conditions, Ga laughed. She said there were 2 conditions. First, the Valori had to name their own cities because humans were terrible at coming up with names. Second, they had to let humans visit sometimes because Valori. Music was supposed to be beautiful and she wanted to learn it. That was all. Those were the only conditions. The humans sent more than just a warship and soldiers. They sent farmers who studied Valori plants and figured out how to grow them in New Eden's soil. They sent builders who worked with Vellery architects to design cities that looked like home, but used human technology to be stronger and safer. They sent teachers who learned the Vellery language so they could help refugee children learn new things, and who asked to learn Vellery knowledge in return. They sent soldiers too. A large group of human Marines built a base on the southern part of the continent. They walked patrol routes every day, watching for any sign of craft ships in the sky. But Talon noticed something interesting about these soldiers. They were always polite. They always asked permission before moving through Vellery areas. When they were not on duty, they helped with ordinary work. She saw Marines carrying building materials. She saw them playing games with Vellery children. She saw them learning Vellery songs and trying to sing along, even though their mouths could not make some of the sounds properly. One evening, Talon found Commander Kong covered in dirt, helping a group of Vellery children plant a memorial garden. This garden would honor all the people who died on Vellery Prime. Kong was kneeling in the soil, laughing as a young boy tried to show him the correct way. To arrange the ceremonial stones, Talon watched for a while before speaking. She asked Kong why the humans stayed. They had already done more than anyone could expect. They had saved the Vellery, given them a home, protected them from the Krath. They could leave now and no one would blame them. Kong stood up, brushed the dirt from his uniform. He asked her if she knew why humans had become a species that traveled between stars. Talon admitted she did not know. Kong said it was because they were afraid. They were afraid of being alone. They were afraid of reaching the stars and finding nothing but empty planets and cold silence. They were also afraid of finding other species and discovering that those species were cruel or did not care about anyone but themselves. He said that humans had found all of those things out in the galaxy. They found cruelty and selfishness in species that could not understand each other. But they also found the Vellery. Talon said the Vellery were just broken people begging for help. They were not special. They were not valuable. Kong shook his head. He said that when the Vellery were at their worst moment, when everything seemed hopeless, they reached out to strangers and trusted those strangers with their lives. That took more courage than anything his Marines had ever done in battle. The Vellery honored humans by asking for help. Giving that help was the least humans could do. A Vellery woman walked over to them. Her name was Sori, and she had become one of the leaders of the new colony. She had lost her whole family on Vellery Prime. But somehow, she had found the strength to keep going and help others. Sori was carrying a cup of something warm. She gave it to Kong and explained that the children wanted him to have it. It was called Remembrance Tea. Vellery families drank it together when they wanted to honor someone special. Sharing it with someone meant they were considered family. Kong looked at the cup for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded rough with emotion. He said thank you. He said he would keep the cup forever. The city grew day by day. Vellery crystal architecture rose alongside human metal and glass. Streets were given names in both languages. A school opened where Vellery and human children sat side by side and learned from each other. 6 months passed. The settlement that had started as tents and temporary shelters became a real city. The Vellery named it Hope's Landing, because that was exactly what it was. For the first time since the fires, the Vellery began to imagine a future. The Krath Empire did not forget. 6 months after the Vellery began building their new home, warning signals lit up across the human sensor network. Something large was gathering at the edge of human space. When scouts went to look, they found a nightmare waiting. 300 Krath warships. Not just the small hunter-killer vessels that had been destroyed before. This was a full invasion force. They had troop transports filled with soldiers. They had planet-cracker weapons that could destroy entire worlds. They had enough firepower to burn New Eden to ashes and everyone on it. The Krath sent a simple message to the humans. Surrender the Vellery or be destroyed. Talon received the news in her new office in Hope's Landing. The city had grown so much in 6 months. Buildings stood where there had been nothing. Gardens bloomed where refugees had once slept on the ground. Children played in streets that had Vellery names. She sat very still and felt the weight of 300,000 lives pressing down on her shoulders. She told Admiral Park that the Valori should leave. They would run again, find somewhere else to hide. They could not ask humans to die fighting for them. The Krath would destroy anyone who stood in their way. Admiral Park had come to New Eden in person for this meeting. She sat across from Talon with her serious face, showing no fear at all. She told Talon something that changed everything. The humans had known this would happen. They had planned for it. They had wanted it. Talon could not understand. Why would anyone want 300 warships coming to kill them? Park explained that the Krath had been a danger to the entire region of space for 200 years. They had destroyed 19 intelligent species completely. They had enslaved dozens more. Eventually, they would have attacked humans too. It was only a matter of time. The Valori had given humans a reason to fight the Krath now. It's on human terms, with a clear purpose. The whole galaxy was watching what would happen. How humans responded would show everyone what kind of species they truly were. The human fleet that came to New Eden was unlike anything Talon had imagined. The Indomitable was there. 47 other ships just like it dropped out of faster-than-light space around New Eden. 200 smaller support vessels came with them. And something else came too. Something so large that Talon's officers could not believe their sensors. It was a mobile battle station that the humans called a Forge class. It was like a flying city made entirely for war. Weapons covered every part of its massive body. These ships came from every part of human space. The people on them had never met a Valori in their lives. But they had seen news reports about the refugees. They had seen pictures of Valori children. They had heard about how two species were learning to build a future together. They came because their government asked them to. But they also came because they wanted to. The Krath fleet dropped out of faster-than-light space, expecting an easy fight. They expected maybe a few human ships protecting the refugees. They expected to crush the resistance quickly and then take their time destroying the planet. They found a wall of steel and fire waiting for them. The battle lasted 3 days. Talon watched from a bunker beneath Hope's Landing. Around her, Valori's civilians had refused to leave. They said this was their home now. They would not run again, no matter what happened. Through the communication screens, she watched the battle in space. She saw human ships destroyed by Krath weapons. She saw the Indomitable take a direct hit that tore away the front part of the Great Warship. She heard Admiral Park's final message. The Admiral ordered her crew to escape while she stayed at the controls. Then she aimed the burning wreck of her ship at a massive Krath command carrier and flew straight into it. The explosion destroyed both vessels. But the humans did not stop fighting. For every human ship that died, 3 Krath vessels were destroyed. Human tactics were fierce and coordinated. They moved as one giant organism, each ship knowing exactly what the others were doing. They fought like people who had something precious to protect, because they did. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Krath fleet broke apart. The surviving ships turned and ran as fast as they could, jumping into faster-than-light space and fleeing toward their empire. They left behind 231 wrecked ships drifting in the darkness. The humans had lost 40 ships. Nearly 10,000 human soldiers had died in those 3 days. Commander Kong survived the battle. He came down to Hope's Landing the day after the fighting ended. His uniform was burned in several places. His arm was wrapped in bandages. But he was alive. Talon met him at the landing area. She tried to find the right words. Nothing seemed good enough. She managed to say Admiral Park's name. Kong's voice was rough when he answered. He said the Admiral died doing exactly what she wanted to do. She died protecting people. He said she had told him once that there were worse ways to leave the universe. Talon asked him the question that had been burning in her heart. Since the first day they met, why did humans sacrifice so much for strangers? Why did they give their lives for people who had nothing to offer in return? Kong looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked past her at the city the Valori had built. He looked at the memorial garden where human names and Valori names would soon be carved side by side in stone. He said it was simple. The Valori had asked for help. The humans could provide that help. What other reason did anyone need? Above them, surviving human ships moved slowly through the sky, guarding the planet that was now stained with their blood. 5 years had passed since the Great Battle. The Valori population on New Eden had grown to more than 1 million. Refugees came from hidden places all across the galaxy when they heard the news. There was a world where their people had found more than shelter. They had found a real home. Hope's Landing was now a true city. Valori crystal towers stood next to human buildings of metal and glass. The streets had names in both languages. Markets sold food from both cultures. Children who had been born on New Eden attended schools where they learned to speak Valori and human languages equally well. These children did not think it was strange that two species lived and worked together. To them, it was simply normal. It was the only world they had ever known. Chancellor Tellin stood before a newly completed monument. She was no longer called ambassador. The Valori Free State had made her their leader, and she had accepted the responsibility with a humble heart. The monument was beautiful. It was a tall spire made of velour crystal and human steel woven together. Carved into its surface were the names of every person who died in what historians now called the Battle of New Eden. Human names and Valori names, mixed together without separation. Standing beside Tellin was Captain Jin Murray. This was the same young medic who had once sat on the floor drawing pictures to comfort a traumatized child. After the battle, she had transferred to become a combat officer. She rose through the ranks quickly. Now she commanded the Indomitable II, a new warship built to replace the one Admiral Park had sacrificed. Tell looked at the monument and then at the woman standing next to her. She said she remembered when she could not understand why humans came to help. The Valori had been a dying people with nothing to give. They had begged strangers for help. Everything Tellin knew about how the galaxy worked said the humans should have turned them away. Murray smiled and said that maybe what Tellin knew was wrong. Tellin touched the cold surface of the monument. She could feel the carved names under her fingertips. Yes, she admitted. She had been wrong about many things. The galaxy believed that power meant taking from others. It believed that survival meant being alone and trusting no one. It believed that kindness was a weakness that would be punished. Humans had shown her a different truth. Real strength came from choosing to protect those who could not protect themselves. Shelter was not just a place. It was a promise to stand with someone no matter what happened. A crowd was gathering for the ceremony to dedicate the monument. Humans and Valori stood together in the plaza. They wore clothes that mixed styles from both cultures. They spoke to each other in languages that borrowed words back and forth. Their children ran and played together, laughing at games that had been invented by combining traditions from both species. Talon stepped forward to speak to the crowd. Her voice was strong and carried across the open space. She said that 5 years ago, her people had sent a message into the darkness. They asked for shelter. They expected very little. Maybe a corner of space where they could hide. Maybe some basic supplies to keep them alive a little longer. Instead, the humans sent soldiers to fight for them. They sent engineers to build with them. They sent a warship to stand between them and their enemies. But the most important thing they sent was themselves. Their hopes and dreams and lives became connected to Valori. Hopes and dreams and lives. The humans taught the Valori that they were not alone in the universe. Tellin announced that the Valori Free State was formally asking to join the United Earth Alliance as partner members, not because they needed protection anymore. They had rebuilt their strength, not because they wanted something from the humans. They had already received more than they could ever repay. They wanted to join because humans had shown them what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. They wanted to pass that gift on to other species who might be lost and afraid somewhere in the galaxy. The crowd erupted in cheers. Human voices and Valori voices mixed together in celebration. After the ceremony ended, Talon found Admiral Kong standing alone at the edge of the memorial garden. He was older now. Gray touched the hair at his temples. But his eyes were still kind, just as they had been when he first welcomed frightened refugees aboard his ship. Talon told him she had never thanked him properly for everything he had done, Kong shook his head gently. He gestured at the city around them, at the people walking through the streets, at the future that was growing stronger every day. He said the Valori had built all of this. The humans just gave them the space to do it. Talon reached out and touched his shoulder. In Valori culture, this gesture meant deep respect and affection. It was how family members honored each other. She said humans had given the Valori much more than space. They had given hope. They had taught a lesson that would last longer than both their species. Kang asked what lesson that was. Talon smiled. She said the lesson was simple. Sometimes when someone asks for help, the right answer is to show up with everything you have and say 4 words. You are safe now. Above them, the indomitable two passed slowly through the sky. Its shadow fell across the monument, across the garden, across the plaza where 2 peoples who had found each other in the darkness now stood together in the light. The story of the Valori and the humans spread across the galaxy over the following years. Other desperate species heard about what happened on New Eden. They heard about a young race that answered a call for help, not with demands or conditions, but with open hands and willing hearts. Some of them sent their own messages into the darkness, hoping that somehow, somewhere, the humans would hear, and the humans always answered, because that was the promise they had made. That was the lesson they had learned from their own painful history. That was the gift they wanted to give to a galaxy that desperately needed to believe in something better. You are not alone. You are safe now. We promise. The humans kept their promises. They always would.